Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Valiant and watched the view screen with careful eyes. His ship had been on patrol for 3 weeks now, and nothing unusual had happened until this moment. The sensors had picked up something strange near the Kepler 442 system, and he had ordered his crew to investigate. Lieutenant Commander Lisa Brennan sat at her tactical station and ran diagnostics on the unknown contact. Her fingers moved quickly across the console as data streamed in from the long-range scanners. She looked up at Morrison with concern in her eyes and reported that the contact was definitely a ship, but not of human design. Morrison felt his heart rate increase slightly, but kept his expression calm. This was it. After decades of searching the stars, humanity had finally found proof that they were not alone in the universe. Morrison ordered his communications officer to open all standard frequencies and broadcast the first contact package that had been prepared years ago. The message contained mathematical principles, basic images of humans and Earth, and a simple greeting in binary code. The Valiant moved closer to the unknown vessel at a slow and non-threatening speed. Morrison made sure their weapons were powered down and their shields were at minimal strength. He wanted to show peaceful intentions in every possible way. The alien ship was larger than the Valiant and had a design unlike anything Morrison had seen before. Its hull seemed to shimmer with an odd purple color, and strange symbols were etched along its side. Lisa kept her eyes on the tactical display and noted that the alien ship had stopped moving. They were just sitting there in space, about 50,000 kilometers away. Minutes passed in tense silence. The bridge crew barely breathed as they waited for a response. Morrison felt sweat forming on his palms, but he kept his hands steady on the armrests of his command chair. Then the communications officer reported that they were receiving a transmission. Morrison ordered him to put it through. A series of harsh clicking sounds and high-pitched tones filled the bridge. The computer tried to analyze the sounds and create a translation matrix, but it needed more data. Morrison ordered another message sent. This time, with more detailed information about human language structure. He hoped that whoever was on that ship would understand that humans wanted to communicate peacefully. The response came without warning. Lisa shouted a warning as her tactical board lit up like a Christmas tree. The alien ship had just armed every weapon system it had. Morrison barely had time to process this information before bright blue energy beams lanced across the space between the two ships. The Valiant shuddered as the beams impacted the shields. Alarms blared throughout the bridge, and the lights flickered. Morrison gripped his armrests and ordered evasive maneuvers. The helmsman threw the ship into a sharp roll as more energy beams cut through the space where they had been seconds before. Lisa reported that shields were holding at 70%, but 3 crew members in Section 14 had been injured when a conduit exploded. Morrison felt anger rising in his chest, but he forced it down. He ordered his crew to hold fire and keep evading. Maybe this was a misunderstanding. Maybe their peaceful approach had been interpreted as a threat somehow. He ordered the communications officer to broadcast on all frequencies that they meant no harm. The alien ship responded by launching what appeared to be missile-like projectiles. Lisa counted 12 of them, incoming fast. Morrison finally accepted the reality of the situation. This was not a misunderstanding. This was an unprovoked attack. He ordered Lisa to target the incoming missiles with point defense systems. The Valiant's automated guns spun up and filled the space with tungsten rounds moving at incredible speeds. The missiles exploded one by one as the rounds found their marks. Morrison made his decision. He would not let his crew die because of some alien species that shot first and asked questions, never. He ordered Lisa to identify the alien ship's weapon systems and prepare to disable them. Lisa worked quickly and efficiently. Her training took over, and her fingers flew across the tactical console. She identified the main weapon batteries on the alien ship's hull and locked targeting solutions. Morrison gave the order to fire. The Valiant's railguns spoke with authority. Solid slugs of depleted uranium accelerated to a fraction of light speed and crossed the distance to the alien ship in less than a second. The rounds punched through the alien shields like they were paper and tore into the weapon arrays with devastating precision. The alien ship seemed to shudder as explosions rippled across its hull. Secondary detonations followed, as stored energy cells cooked off. Within 30 seconds, every weapon system on the alien ship had been reduced to twisted metal and sparking electronics. Morrison ordered ceasefire and watched the alien vessel carefully. The ship's engines flared to life, and it began to turn away. Morrison let them go. He had no desire to destroy the ship or kill its crew. He had only wanted to protect his own people. The alien ship jumped to faster than light speed and disappeared from sensors. The bridge was quiet except for the soft beeping of various systems and the occasional damage report coming through from other sections. Morrison took a deep breath and looked at his crew. They had just survived humanity's first contact with an alien species, and it had gone about as badly as possible. He ordered a full damage report and told the medical teams to take care of the injured crew members. Lisa reported that the shields had held, and the damage was mostly minor. The Valiant could make it back to base without problems. Morrison called up Admiral Paul Griffin at Luna Base on the quantum communication system. The Admiral's face appeared on the screen, and Morrison delivered his report. They had encountered an alien vessel. The aliens had fired first without any provocation. The Valiant had defended itself and disabled the alien ship's weapons. The aliens had fled. Morrison transmitted all sensor logs and tactical data to support his report. Admiral Griffin listened carefully, and his expression grew more serious with each passing moment. When Morrison finished, the Admiral was quiet for a few seconds. Then he told Morrison to return to Luna Base immediately. The Admiral said that everything had just changed for humanity. They were no longer alone in the universe, and they had just learned that the universe could be very hostile. Morrison acknowledged the orders and set course for home. He looked out at the stars and wondered what would come next. Somewhere out there was an alien species that had attacked humans on sight. Would they come back with more ships? Would other alien species be the same way? Morrison did not know the answers, but he knew one thing for certain. Humanity had just announced its presence to the galaxy, and they had done so by winning their first battle. He hoped that would be enough to make anyone else think twice before attacking a human ship. The Galactic Council chambers on Sanctum Prime had stood for 3,000 years and represented the pinnacle of cooperative civilization among the stars. 200 different species maintained diplomatic relations here, and the building itself was a marvel of architecture that incorporated design elements from dozens of different cultures. High Counselor Vexthar moved through the corridors on his serpentine body and prepared himself for what would surely be a difficult session. News had arrived 3 days ago about an incident involving the Zytheran Collective and an unknown species. The unknown species had destroyed a Zytheran warship, and that fact alone was remarkable enough to warrant an emergency council meeting. Ambassador Krell of the Zytheran Collective was already in the main chamber when Vexthar arrived. Krell was a large being with thick armored plates covering his body and 6 powerful limbs. His species had evolved on a high-gravity world, and they were among the strongest in the council. They were also among the most aggressive, which had caused problems before. Krell was pacing back and forth in the area reserved for his delegation, and his body language suggested he was agitated. Vexthar slithered over to his own position at the head of the chamber and activated the council systems. Holographic displays came to life around the circular room, and representatives from 200 worlds began to file in. Counselor Miraseth arrived and took her place near Vexthar. She was an ancient being whose species lived for thousands of years and accumulated vast knowledge. Her wise eyes surveyed the chamber, and she leaned close to Vexthar to speak quietly. She said that she sensed this meeting would change everything. Vexthar had to agree. Once all the representatives were present, he called the session to order and recognized Ambassador Krell, who had requested the emergency meeting. Krell stepped forward into the center of the chamber, where everyone could see him clearly. His voice boomed through the translation systems as he began his address. Krell spoke of a great injustice and an unprovoked act of aggression. He claimed that a Zytheran exploration vessel had been brutally attacked by an unknown species near the Outer Rim. The vessel had been going about its lawful business when it encountered a ship from a species that called themselves humans. Without warning or communication, these humans had opened fire with devastating weapons. The Zytheran ship had barely escaped with its life, and many crew members had been injured. Krell demanded that the Council immediately impose sanctions on this aggressive species and prohibit them from entering Council space. Several representatives murmured their agreement and concern. The Zytheran Collective had one of the most powerful military forces in the known galaxy. If even they had been overwhelmed, then these humans must be extraordinarily dangerous. Vex's Thar listened carefully and noted that something felt wrong about Krell's story. He requested that Krell provide sensor logs and communication records from the encounter. Krell hesitated for just a moment before transmitting the data. Vex Thar loaded the information into the Council systems and began reviewing it. What he found made his blood run cold for an entirely different reason than what Krell had implied. The sensor logs clearly showed that the Zytheran vessel had fired first. The human ship had been broadcasting what appeared to be first contact protocols. The humans had not even had their shields at full strength when the Zytharans attacked. Only after sustaining damage did the human ship return fire, and when it did, the results were devastating. Vex Thar played the sensor logs for the entire Council to see. The holographic display showed the encounter in perfect detail. The representatives watched in stunned silence as the human ship's weapons tore through the Zytheran defenses in less than 30 seconds. Krell began to protest loudly and claimed the logs had been tampered with. Counselor Miraseth stood, and her ancient voice carried authority that could not be ignored. She stated that the logs had been verified by the Council's own systems and showed no signs of alteration. The Zytheran vessel had indeed fired first. This was not an act of human aggression, but rather an act of self-defense. The chamber erupted in heated discussion. Ambassador Claire Bennett arrived at the Council chambers with Admiral Paul Griffin at her side. They had traveled for 5 days at maximum speed to reach Sanctum Prime after Earth received an invitation to address the Council. Bennett was nervous but determined. She had spent her entire diplomatic career preparing for first contact with alien species, and now, that moment had arrived under the worst possible circumstances. Admiral Griffin looked impressive in his dress uniform and carried himself with the confidence of a military commander who had seen combat. They were escorted into the chamber by a council aide who explained the proceedings so far. Bennett felt relief when she learned that the council had already seen the truth of what happened. High Counselor Vex Thar recognized the human delegation and invited them to address the council. Bennett stepped forward with Griffin beside her. She introduced herself as Earth's diplomatic representative and Admiral Griffin as the commander of humanity's space forces. Her voice was steady as she explained that humanity had sought peaceful contact. The UES Valiant had followed every first contact protocol that human scientists had developed. They had broadcast peaceful intentions on all frequencies. They had kept their weapons powered down. The Zytheran vessel had responded with immediate violence, and the Valiant had defended itself. Bennett emphasized that humanity desired peaceful relations with all species and hoped this unfortunate incident would not define future interactions. Admiral Griffin activated a holographic display and transmitted additional data to the Council systems. He showed them detailed tactical analysis of the engagement. He explained human weapons technology and defensive capabilities. He offered to share information about Earth and humanity's history. The Council representatives watched and listened with growing amazement. Many had assumed that any species capable of defeating a Zytheran warship must be ancient and highly advanced. They were shocked to learn that humans had only achieved faster than light travel 50 years ago. Admiral Griffin explained that humanity had spread to 12 colony worlds and built a respectable fleet of ships for defense and exploration. Counselor Miraseth asked the question that many were thinking. How had such a young species developed such powerful weapons? Admiral Griffin's answer was simple and honest. Humanity came from a world with limited resources and many predators. Human history included thousands of years of conflict between different groups. Humans had learned to fight very well because their survival had often depended on it. This explanation caused quite a stir among the council members. Most species in the council had evolved on worlds with abundant resources and few natural threats. They had developed civilization through cooperation rather than competition. The concept of a warrior species was not unknown but it was rare. Ambassador Krell interrupted and demanded that the Council still impose restrictions on humanity. He argued that a species with such violent tendencies posed a danger to everyone. Vex Thar silenced him with a sharp gesture. The High Counselor stated that the evidence was clear. The Zytherans had acted aggressively, and humans had responded appropriately. The Council would not punish a species for defending itself. Instead, Vex Thar proposed that humanity be invited to establish formal diplomatic relations with the Council. Many representatives agreed. A vote was called, and the measure passed by a significant majority. The Zytheran delegation walked out in protest. Bennett felt overwhelming relief and gratitude. She thanked the Council for their fairness and wisdom. Admiral Griffin added that humanity looked forward to learning from the older civilizations and contributing what they could to the galactic community. As the session ended and representatives began to leave, Counselor Miraseth approached the human delegation. She welcomed them warmly and offered to serve as a guide to Council politics and customs. Bennett accepted gratefully. Miraseth then spoke quietly with a note of warning in her ancient voice. She said that not all species would welcome humanity as easily as today's vote suggested. The fact that humans could defeat Zytharans so decisively would make some nervous. Bennett understood. Humanity had just announced itself to the galaxy as a force to be reckoned with. Unknown to anyone in the chamber, Ambassador Krell had already sent an encrypted message to his homeworld. He reported that the Council had sided with the humans and humiliated the Zytheran collective. He urged the military command to take action before these dangerous humans could establish themselves. Pride and anger clouded his judgment as he recommended a preemptive strike. The message would take 2 days to reach the Zytheran homeworld. Fleetmaster Krothzor studied the tactical displays in his command center on the Zytheran homeworld and felt satisfaction building in his chest. Before him floated holographic representations of 40 warships, the largest fleet the collective had assembled in 2 centuries. His orders had been clear and came directly from the High Command. These primitive humans had humiliated a Zytheran vessel and needed to be taught their place in the galaxy. Krothzor planned to deliver that lesson with overwhelming force. His strategy was simple and brutal. 20 ships would attack the human homeworld in the Sol system, while another 20 would strike their largest colony at New Haven in Tau Ceti. Simultaneous attacks on 2 fronts would divide human forces and ensure victory. Admiral Paul Griffin sat in his office at Luna Base and reviewed intelligence reports with growing concern. His network of deep space monitoring stations had detected unusual Zytheran fleet movements. Ships were gathering at staging points near Zytheran space, and their courses suggested they were preparing for military action. Griffin had hoped the council meeting would resolve tensions, but apparently the Zytharans had other ideas. He called an emergency meeting of his senior staff and began making preparations. Every available ship was recalled to Sol, and defense stations were placed on high alert. He also sent urgent warnings to all colony worlds to prepare for possible attack. Captain Jake Morrison received Griffin's message while his battle group was conducting training exercises near Jupiter. He immediately ordered his 6 ships to break off exercises and prepare for combat operations. His battle group consisted of 3 cruisers and 3 destroyers, all of them modern and well-equipped. Morrison reviewed the intelligence data and made a quick decision. New Haven had minimal defenses compared to Sol. If the Zytherans were planning a 2-front attack, then the colony would need help. He opened a direct channel to Admiral Griffin and volunteered to take his battle group to defend New Haven. Griffin was quiet for a moment, then approved the request. Morrison's ships turned toward the Tau Ceti system and jumped to faster-than-light speed. Commander Ryan Hayes stood in the command center of New Haven's main defense facility and watched the early warning sensors with nervous attention. The colony had been established only 10 years ago and was home to 50,000 human settlers. Defenses consisted of orbital platforms with missile batteries and ground-based railgun installations. Hayes had only 200 military personnel under his command, and most of them were garrison troops with limited combat experience. When Admiral Griffin's warning arrived, Hayes immediately went to battle stations. He ordered civilian evacuation to underground shelters and powered up every weapon system the colony had. His people worked with quiet efficiency born from countless drills. Hayes hoped those drills would be enough. The Scytheran fleet dropped out of faster-than-light speed at the edge of the New Haven system 3 days after leaving their staging area. Fleet Master Krathzor commanded from the lead vessel and surveyed the system with confidence. Long-range sensors detected the small human colony and its modest defenses. Krathzor almost laughed. 20 warships against a few orbital platforms. This would be over quickly. He ordered his fleet to advance in formation and transmitted a message to the colony demanding immediate surrender. The message was ignored. Krathzor shrugged and ordered his ships to open fire at maximum range. Commander Hayes watched the incoming fleet on his tactical display and felt his stomach tighten. 20 ships, far more than intelligence had suggested. His orbital platforms began firing their missiles even though the range was extreme. The missiles streaked toward the advancing Scytheran fleet, trailing fire. Krathzor's ships barely adjusted their shields. The human missiles exploded against Scytheran barriers and did no significant damage. Hayes ordered his ground installations to prepare for surface bombardment. He knew his small force could not win, but he would make the Scytherans pay for every meter they advanced. Morrison's battle group dropped out of faster-than-light speed, directly behind the Scytheran formation. The timing was perfect. The Scytherans were focused entirely on the colony ahead and had not posted rear guard sensors. Morrison took in the tactical situation instantly and began issuing orders. His ships spread out and locked targeting solutions on the nearest Scytharan vessels. He opened fire without warning. Human railguns launched their deadly projectiles at the unsuspecting enemy. The first 3 Scytheran ships exploded as tungsten slugs moving at relativistic speeds punched through their shields and hulls. Secondary explosions rippled through their engineering sections, and the ships broke apart. Krathzor stared at his displays in shock and disbelief. 3 ships destroyed in seconds. More human vessels had appeared from nowhere and were tearing through his formation. He ordered his fleet to turn and engage these new threats. The Scytheran ships were powerful, but they were designed for straightforward combat. The humans fought differently. Morrison's battle group used coordinated pack tactics. 2 or 3 human ships would focus fire on a single Scytharan vessel, overwhelming its shields and destroying critical systems before moving to the next target. The Scytherans tried to respond, but they were too slow and too predictable. Lisa Brennan worked her tactical station with practiced efficiency. She coordinated targeting data between all 6 ships in the battle group and identified weaknesses in Scytheran formations. Her voice was calm as she called out priority targets to Morrison. The captain trusted her completely and followed her recommendations without hesitation. Another Scytheran ship died under concentrated fire. Then another. The space around New Haven filled with debris and expanding clouds of gas from destroyed vessels. Hayes watched from the surface with amazement. The human fleet was outnumbered more than 3-1, but they were winning. Krathzor realized his mistake too late. These humans were not primitive at all. Their weapons were superior, and their tactics were devastating. 5 more of his ships sustained critical damage and fell out of formation. The remaining vessels were taking heavy fire, and their shields were failing. Krathzor had never experienced anything like this. They had assaulted. Every battle the Scytherans had fought for the past century had been won through superior firepower and heavy armor. The humans had neither in great quantity, but they had something more important. They had experience, and they knew how to fight smart. Morrison ordered his destroyers to break off and pursue the damaged Scytheran ships that were trying to escape. His cruisers continued to hammer the main formation. The battle had lasted 20 minutes, and 8 Scytheran ships were destroyed. 5 more were crippled and drifting. The remaining 7 vessels suddenly turned and jumped to faster-than-light speed. Morrison let them go. His own ships had sustained some damage, and his crew was exhausted. He ordered his battle group to take up defensive positions around New Haven and sent a status report to Admiral Griffin. They had won, but Morrison knew this was just one battle. In the Sol system, the main Scytheran force encountered a very different reception. Vice Admiral Karen Murphy commanded the Mars Orbital Defense Platform and had been preparing for 3 days. The Zytherans dropped out of faster-than-light speed and found themselves facing not just 20 human warships, but thousands of automated defense satellites. Murphy had positioned her forces in a layered defense grid that forced the Zytherans to run through multiple kill zones. The battle was brutal and short. Zytheran shields proved inadequate against the sheer volume of fire. Railgun rounds and missiles came from every direction. The Zytherans managed to destroy several defense satellites and damage 2 human ships, but the cost was terrible. 12 Zytheran ships were completely destroyed in the first hour. The rest sustained catastrophic damage and barely escaped. Fleetmaster Krothzor received reports of both battles from his command center and felt his world crumbling. His fleet of 40 ships had been reduced to fragments. More than 20 vessels destroyed, and most of the survivors too damaged to fight. The humans had won decisively on both fronts. Krothzor was immediately recalled to the homeworld to face inquiry. His career was over, and the Zytheran collective had been humiliated. News of the battles reached the Galactic Council within hours. High Counselor Vexithar read the reports multiple times to be certain he understood correctly. The Zytherans had launched an unprovoked assault with overwhelming numbers. The humans had defeated them easily. This changed everything. A species that could destroy a Zytheran fleet was a major power whether they realized it or not. Vexithar immediately called for another emergency session. He suspected that many council members would be both impressed and frightened by what humanity had demonstrated. The galaxy had just learned that humans were not to be trifled with. The Galactic Council chambers filled quickly as representatives responded to High Counselor Vexithar's emergency summons. The mood was tense and uncertain. Everyone had received preliminary reports about the Zytheran attack on human territories and the shocking outcome. Military advisors accompanied many of the delegates this time, something that rarely happened in the council's peaceful halls. Vexithar moved to his position and surveyed the assembled representatives with his ancient eyes. He could sense fear in the chamber, and that disturbed him greatly. The council was supposed to be a place of cooperation and understanding, not fear. Ambassador Claire Bennett entered with Admiral Paul Griffin, and they took their places in the area now designated for Earth's delegation. Bennett noticed that many representatives were staring at them with expressions that were hard to read through alien features. Some looked curious. Others looked worried. A few looked openly hostile. Griffin stood tall and calm, his military bearing evident in every movement. He had fought in the defense of Sol, and his uniform bore new decorations for valor. Bennett had insisted he wear them. If the council was going to judge humanity by military capability, then they should see that humans honored their defenders. Military analyst Telgran took the floor first. He was a being whose species specialized in tactical analysis and served as the council's primary military consultant. His presentation was methodical and detailed. He displayed holographic recreations of both battles, based on sensor data collected by council monitoring stations. The representatives watched in silence as the simulations played out. Telgran pointed out specific moments where human tactics had proven superior: the coordinated targeting, the use of terrain and positioning, the devastating effectiveness of kinetic weapons at relativistic speeds. He concluded that human weapons technology was at least 50 years ahead of Council standard, and their tactical doctrine suggested centuries of warfare experience. Counselor Miraseth asked the question many were thinking. How could such a young spacefaring species possess such advanced military capabilities? Admiral Griffin stood to answer. His voice carried clearly through the translation systems as he explained the uncomfortable truth. Humanity had not developed these weapons after reaching the stars. They had developed them on Earth during thousands of years of conflict between nations, ideologies, and resources. When humans finally achieved space travel, they simply adapted existing weapons technology for use in the vacuum. Railguns were derived from artillery, missiles from rockets, shield technology from research into electromagnetic fields. The Council had assumed military technology would naturally evolve slowly because their own species had little need for it. Humans had evolved it quickly because they had always needed it. Ambassador Krell of the Zytheran Collective stood, and his voice was filled with barely controlled rage. He accused Admiral Griffin of lying and claimed that no species could develop such weapons without guidance from older civilizations. Griffin's response was cold and direct. He offered to transmit Earth's complete military history to the Council archives. Bennett winced internally. Earth's history was not something to be proud of in many ways. Wars, genocides, nuclear weapons, biological warfare. But it was the truth, and hiding it would only create suspicion. Vexthar accepted the offer, and Council systems began receiving the data. The chamber fell into stunned silence as representatives reviewed the information flooding into their systems. They saw images of ancient human warfare with primitive weapons, medieval sieges, and cavalry charges, world wars with millions dead, nuclear explosions that could destroy entire cities, chemical weapons, tank battles, naval warfare, aerial combat. The sheer scope and brutality of human conflict throughout history was overwhelming to species that had rarely, if ever, experienced war. Counselor Miraseth finally spoke into the silence. She said that humanity was what her people called a warrior species. Evolution had shaped humans through competition and conflict. Their world had been harsh and demanding. They had learned to fight or die, and they had chosen to fight. Vexthar called for order, as discussions threatened to dissolve into chaos. He demanded to know why Ambassador Krell had authorized military action against humanity without Council approval. Krell attempted to deflect blame. He claimed the military command had acted independently. He said he had only recommended that humans be watched carefully. Admiral Griffin stepped forward and transmitted data to the Council systems, intercepted communications between Krell and the Zytheran High Command. Messages clearly showing that Krell had urged a preemptive strike and provided tactical information about human colonies. The evidence was damning. The Council erupted in outrage. Krell had violated fundamental Council laws by encouraging military aggression without approval. Vexthar immediately called for a vote to strip the Zytheran Collective of its military command privileges. The measure passed overwhelmingly. Only 3 delegations voted against it, and 2 abstained. Krell was removed from his position as ambassador and escorted from the chamber by Council security. The Zytheran delegation sat in shame as their species' reputation crumbled. They would spend years rebuilding trust within the Council. Ambassador Bennett stood and requested permission to address the Council. Vexthar granted it. Bennett spoke carefully and chose her words with precision. She said that humanity did not seek conflict with anyone. The violence of human history was something her people were not proud of but could not deny. Humans had learned hard lessons about the cost of war. Modern humanity valued peace and cooperation above all else. Earth's government had sent her to the Council with a simple message. Humanity wanted to join the galactic community as partners and friends. They would share their knowledge and technology freely. They would contribute to the common good. But they would also defend themselves if attacked. Any species that chose aggression against humanity would face the full might of Earth's military forces. Admiral Griffin activated another display. Tactical data showing the complete Earth defense fleet. 300 warships of various classes. Defensive platforms around every colony world. Deep space monitoring networks. Automated defense grids. The Council representatives stared at the numbers in disbelief. High Counselor Vexthar asked how humanity had built such a fleet so quickly. The Council's intelligence had estimated perhaps 30 human vessels in existence. Griffin's answer sent chills through the chamber. These ships had been built over the past 50 years as defensive measures. Humanity had achieved faster than light travel and immediately begun preparing for the possibility of hostile contact. Every colony established had been defended, every trade route protected. Humans had always assumed the universe might be dangerous, and they had prepared accordingly. Counselor Miraseth spoke again with her ancient voice carrying weight and wisdom. She said that the Council now understood what it meant to deal with a warrior species. Most Council members came from worlds where evolution had been gentle and resources abundant. Their species had developed cooperation naturally because conflict was rare. Humanity came from a world where survival meant constant struggle. They had adapted to think in terms of threats and defenses. This was not evil or wrong, merely different. The Council needed to accept that humanity brought a perspective that had been missing. Sometimes peace required the capability and willingness to fight. Humanity possessed both. A representative from the Keltharian Unity asked about human intentions toward the Council. Would humanity seek to dominate through military strength? Admiral Griffin shook his head firmly. He explained that Earth had no interest in empire building or conquest. Human history had proven that such endeavors always ended badly. The colonies humanity had established were all voluntary settlements. No species had been displaced or harmed. Earth sought trade and friendship, not submission. But Griffin also made clear that humanity would not be pushed around or intimidated. They had proven they could defend themselves, and would do so whenever necessary. Vexthar called for a formal vote on several measures. First, humanity would be granted full membership in the Galactic Council with voting rights. Second, the Zetheran Collective would issue a formal apology to Earth and pay reparations for damages. Third, the Council would establish a joint committee to study human military doctrine and consider what could be learned. All three measures passed with strong majorities. Bennett felt overwhelming relief. Humanity had been accepted despite, or perhaps because of their warrior nature. As the session ended, several representatives approached the human delegation. Some offered congratulations. Others asked questions about specific technologies or tactics. A few made it clear they remained suspicious of human intentions. Admiral Griffin handled them all, with diplomatic grace. But Counselor Miraseth pulled Bennett aside privately. The ancient being spoke quietly so others would not hear. She warned that while the Council had officially accepted humanity, not everyone was pleased. 3 species on the Council's edge had been expanding their own territories aggressively. They viewed themselves as future powers in the galaxy. Humanity's sudden appearance and military capability threatened their ambitions. Bennett thanked her for the warning and promised that Earth would remain vigilant. Admiral Griffin and Ambassador Bennett left the Council chambers and returned to their quarters. Griffin poured himself a drink and stared out at the alien sky of Sanctum Prime. Bennett asked if he thought they had made the right impression. Griffin was quiet for a moment, then nodded. He said that humanity had shown both strength and restraint. They had fought when attacked but had not pursued vengeance. They had shared their history honestly, including the dark parts. Most importantly, they had offered partnership instead of dominance. Whether the Council truly accepted them would take time to determine. But at least now, humanity had a seat at the table. The galaxy knew that Earth and its colonies would not be easy prey for anyone. That knowledge alone might prevent future conflicts. 6 months had passed since the Zetheran conflict ended, and the galaxy had settled into a new normal. Admiral Paul Griffin now held the position of Earth's Chief of Galactic Relations, and spent most of his time coordinating between human forces and various Council species. He stood in his new office on Sanctum Prime and reviewed the morning reports with satisfaction. Joint training exercises were underway in 4 different systems. Technology sharing agreements had been signed with 17 species. Trade relations were flourishing. The transition had gone more smoothly than anyone had dared hope. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the joint vessel Harmony and felt pride in what he saw around him. His crew consisted of humans and aliens working side by side. 20 different species were represented among the 200 crew members. Communication had been difficult at first. Different species had different ways of thinking and working, but Morrison had insisted on patience and mutual respect. Now his crew functioned as smoothly as any purely human vessel he had commanded. They had learned from each other. The aliens had adopted some human tactical thinking. The humans had incorporated alien approaches to problem solving. The result was a crew that combined the best of multiple civilizations. Commander Ryan Hayes had been promoted and now served as a liaison officer, helping to train Council defensive forces. He discovered quickly that most Council species had never fought a real war. Their military vessels were designed more for policing pirate activity than combat against determined opponents. Hayes and other human instructors taught them about real combat tactics, how to coordinate fire, how to use terrain and positioning, how to respond to unexpected threats. The alien officers were eager students. They recognized that humanity had valuable knowledge born from hard experience. Ambassador Claire Bennett worked tirelessly to expand Earth's diplomatic relationships throughout Council space. She met with representatives from dozens of species and negotiated agreements on everything from cultural exchanges to mineral rights. Bennett discovered that many aliens were fascinated by human culture. Earth's art and music and literature carried an emotional intensity that surprised species from more peaceful backgrounds. Human stories often dealt with conflict and struggle and triumph over adversity. These themes were universal, even if human history was more violent than most. The Zetheron Collective had undergone significant changes. A new ambassador, named Kreth Mal, arrived at the council with explicit orders to rebuild relationships. He approached Ambassador Bennett with genuine humility and offered a formal apology on behalf of his entire species. Bennett accepted graciously. Kreth Mal explained that the Zetheran people had been shocked by their military defeat. They had believed themselves invincible for so long that the loss had shattered their worldview. Now they were rebuilding with new understanding. Pride was dangerous. Cooperation was valuable. Strength came in many forms. Bennett agreed to help establish cultural exchange programs between Earth and the Zetheran homeworld. Admiral Griffin created the Joint Defense Initiative with support from High Counselor Vex Thar. The program paired human military personnel with Council defense forces on joint vessels. The idea was to share knowledge and build trust through cooperation. 30 ships were commissioned for the program over the first year. Each ship had a mixed crew and joint command structure. Morrison's vessel Harmony was the flagship. The other ships followed similar models. Early results were promising. The joint crews performed well in exercises, and several species had requested human advisors for their home defense fleets. Counselor Miraseth became humanity's strongest advocate on the Council. The ancient being saw in humans something that the Council had been missing. Most Council species had grown comfortable over centuries of peace. They had stopped pushing boundaries or taking risks. Humanity brought a different perspective. Humans were always looking ahead, always planning for possibilities. Miraseth believed this attitude would benefit the entire Council. She worked to counter the remaining suspicions some species held toward Earth. Human engineers began sharing defensive technology with Council allies. Shield generators that could resist kinetic impacts better. Point defense systems for anti-missile work. Improved sensor arrays. Manufacturing techniques for stronger hull materials. In return, humanity gained access to advanced medical technology that extended human lifespans. Agricultural techniques that improved crop yields on colony worlds. Faster-than-light drive systems that were more efficient than Earth's designs. The exchange of knowledge benefited everyone. Council species gained better defenses. Humanity gained improvements in quality of life. Not everyone welcomed these changes. 3 species on the Council's edge had been quietly building their own military capabilities for years. The Vortan Imperium, the Cathar Ascendancy, and the Nexian Collective all viewed themselves as future powers in the galaxy. They had been expanding aggressively into unclaimed space and pressuring smaller species into tributary relationships. Humanity's arrival and obvious military strength threatened their plans. None of them had weapons that could match human technology. None of them had the combat experience that humanity possessed. This knowledge made them angry and fearful. High Counselor Vex Thar called Admiral Griffin to a private meeting. The Serpentine being spoke with unusual concern. He shared intelligence about the 3 aggressive species and their growing military buildups. Vex Thar worried that they might attempt to test humanity before the Council's defensive cooperation became too strong. Griffin listened carefully and thanked him for the warning. He immediately sent messages to Earth, recommending increased patrols in the outer colonies. Griffin also shared the information with his joint defense commanders. If trouble was coming, they would be ready. Captain Morrison took the Harmony on patrol along the frontier regions where Council space met unexplored territory. His mixed crew performed admirably during the routine work of checking trade routes and investigating anomalies. Morrison found that he enjoyed working with aliens. They brought different ideas and perspectives that enriched every discussion. His tactical officer was a Keltharian who thought in patterns that humans found unusual but effective. His chief engineer was from a species that lived in methane atmospheres and had to work in an environmental suit, but her understanding of power systems was unmatched. Ambassador Bennett attended a cultural festival on one of the core Council worlds. Humans and dozens of alien species mingled freely. Earth musicians performed alongside alien artists. Human food vendors offered cuisine from around Earth, while aliens shared dishes from their own worlds. Children of multiple species played together, without concern for differences. Bennett watched it all with hope in her heart. This was the future that made all the struggle worthwhile. Different species learning from each other and building something better together. Commander Hayes led a training exercise with a mixed force of human and alien ships. The scenario involved responding to a pirate attack on a civilian convoy. Hayes watched from the command vessel as his forces executed the mission. They did well. Not perfect, but improving steadily. After the exercise, he held a debriefing session. Human and alien officers discussed what worked and what needed improvement. The conversation was frank and productive. Hayes reflected that, 6 months ago, such cooperation would have seemed impossible. Now it was routine. High Counselor Vex Thar convened a special session to review the progress of human integration into the Council. The reports were overwhelmingly positive. Trade had increased, technology sharing was proceeding smoothly. Joint defense exercises showed excellent results. Crime rates had actually decreased in areas where human patrols operated because potential troublemakers now feared encountering the famous human warriors. Several smaller species that had been pressured by aggressive neighbors requested human protection. Vex Thar approved limited deployments to support these requests. Admiral Griffin received an urgent message while reviewing deployment schedules. Long-range sensors had detected an unknown vessel in deep space beyond Council territory. The vessel was massive, larger than anything in the Council database. It was moving toward Council space at high speed. Griffin immediately ordered Morrison's battle group to investigate. He also put the entire Joint Defense Initiative on alert. This could be nothing. Or, it could be the next great challenge. Either way, humanity and the Council would face it together. Morrison received Griffin's orders and felt his pulse quicken. The Harmony, and 5 other joint vessels, jumped to faster-than-light speed and headed toward the coordinates. It took them 3 days to reach the area. When they dropped back to normal space, Morrison stared at the view screen in wonder. The unknown vessel was indeed massive, 10 times the size of any ship he had ever seen. Its design was completely alien, unlike anything in the Council database. Morrison ordered his communications officer to broadcast greetings on all frequencies just as he had done months ago with the Zytharans. This time the response was different. The massive vessel replied with a complex mathematical sequence that the computer recognized as peaceful communication. Morrison felt relief flood through him. Contact was being established properly. His crew worked to decode the alien language and establish dialogue. The beings on the massive ship called themselves the Architects. They were an ancient race that had been exploring the galaxy for thousands of years. They had detected the energy signatures from the recent battles and come to investigate. They were curious about the species that had such powerful weapons. Morrison explained that he commanded a joint vessel representing the Galactic Council and Earth. He transmitted information about the Council and humanity's recent membership. The Architects responded with interest. They had encountered the Council before, but centuries ago. They were pleased to learn that the Council now included a warrior species. The universe held many dangers, and military strength combined with wisdom was valuable. The Architects requested permission to visit Sanctum Prime and establish formal relations. Morrison immediately contacted Admiral Griffin and relayed the request. The Galactic Council prepared to receive the architects with appropriate ceremony. High Counselor Vex Thar ordered the Grand Reception Hall opened for the first time in decades. Ambassador Bennett worked with other diplomats to organize the event. Admiral Griffin coordinated security with Morrison's joint force, providing escort. When the architect delegation arrived, they towered over most council species. Their technology was obviously advanced, far beyond anything the council possessed. Yet, they treated everyone with respect and courtesy. The architects addressed the council and spoke of their long travels through the galaxy. They shared knowledge about distant regions and dangers that lurked in deep space. They warned about aggressive species that had destroyed civilizations. They offered to share star charts and technology in exchange for cultural information and trade goods. The council eagerly accepted. The architects then turned to the human delegation. They said they were particularly impressed by humanity's combination of military capability and diplomatic skill. A species that could fight but chose cooperation was rare. They offered to establish special relations with Earth. Admiral Griffin accepted on behalf of humanity. He recognized that the architects could be valuable allies and sources of knowledge. But he also remained cautious. Griffin had learned that the universe held surprises both good and bad. As the reception ended and delegates mingled, Counselor Miraseth approached Bennett. The ancient being spoke with satisfaction. She said that humanity's arrival had awakened the council from stagnation. Now, new species were making contact. New opportunities were emerging. The future looked brighter than it had in centuries. Bennett agreed. Humanity had found its place among the stars, not as conquerors or victims but as partners, building something greater together. Whatever challenges came next, they would face them united.